What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. Well, it looks like Sony is getting sued again. This for their PlayStation Store and their network pricing and availability. And with how this keeps happening, it does make me wonder about the future and how things could become actually very unfavorable for Sony in a market that's getting less and less competitive, but we'll go over that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about Clair Obscur Expedition 33 that's out next month, but previews are now live, giving us a bunch of new details around what's looking like a very interesting turn-based RPG. And then we have Rockstar making an interesting move, a new acquisition, and this studio, well, it actually makes a lot of sense. So if you guys enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawnwave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And of course, members for the channel do get Newswave early. If you would like to learn more about that, click the join button down below or check the description for a link there. And we're going to start today with Bandai Namco, as it appears they're maybe opening things up when it comes to their current franchises. You can see this was posted up. This is from Broski, who says, Bandai Namco are launching an initiative to encourage licensing of their IP effective April 1st, 2025. So it's still on the table for it being an April Fool's Day joke, but at least at this time, the website being up does list, most of their IPs. I was looking through it. Even like Elden Ring is on there, Pac-Man, Tekken. I did notice that Xenosaga, Dot Hack, Batten Kaitos, Soul Calibur, Dark Souls, got it. The list goes on and on and on. And while I can't say you can guarantee that any of these franchises would get new entries from other studios, to me, this just shows that there are many IPs that they're open to for collaboration, or at least they're open to hear different pitches for. So, we saw that Secret Levels episode for Pac-Man. I wouldn't have expected that, and then here we are now with seemingly a new Pac-Man game coming out that looks like it's sort of in the same idea. So things like that, curveballs that could happen from different pitches and ideas from studios outside of Bandai Namco could breathe new life into some of these older franchises. So it's very, very interesting. Something certainly to keep an eye on here. Also, do you remember Scalebound? Because it seems like Hideki Kamiya or Platinum Games has wanted to remind us of that every single year. It looks like he's back at it again now in 2025. We can see this was posted actually by himself, Hideki Kamiya, over on Twitter X, as he did quote tweet Clovers Inc., the new studio that they formed there with Capcom. And at least in this tweet that he was quote tweeting, mentions they were reminiscing about the days and development of Scalebound while watching YouTube videos. And he just says, I'd love to make it again someday. Let's do it, Phil. So the Scalebound is just, it might be a situation of time to let that go, because I just don't know if it's ever going to happen again. Although, it's clear that right now the way Microsoft wants to approach development, say, in Japan, is through collaborations, publishing, deals like that, rather than have a studio there. So maybe they are open to attempting it again, and I guess in this case, it would be with Capcom and Clovers, but they are also working on Okami 2 right now, so you feel like their hands are kind of full, but maybe for the future. It seems like at least a company with Capcom that Microsoft is actually quite familiar with and would be more comfortable maybe working with. So that's at least something, I guess, to keep in mind for the future, we'll see. Oh, and I did see this going around a lot, so I have good news for Dragon Quest fans. Dragon Quest XI's is now back up on the Switch eShop, as it was pulled down seemingly for publishing or some situation there with rights and stuff changing hands. But you can see this is on the Dragon Quest account. It not only is it back up, but it's been permanently reduced in price to $39.99. So $40 for this JRPG is, I'll say completely worth it. It's an awesome game. I loved Dragon Quest XI when it came out. Dragon Quest XI's just built on top of that. So easy recommendation. But yes, for people out there who are concerned and trying to figure out why it was missing, some back-end dealings and stuff that had to get ironed out, but now it's back at $40, so definitely worth checking out, especially if you see some Switch sales or something going on and it gets marked down even further. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Sony getting sued once again, this being just for their digital platform when it comes to selling games on that PlayStation Store. We can see this, though, is posted up. This is over on Cyber News. says the Dutch Mass Claims and Consumer Foundation has filed a class action lawsuit against Sony for abusing its market position in the digital sale of PlayStation games to increase prices. According to the foundation, Sony's prices for digital content in the PlayStation Store are excessive. As a result, millions of Dutch people have been paying too much for PlayStation games and in-game content for years. Research has shown that digital copies of video games are on average 47% more expensive than physical copies. Did we really need a research for that? Like, we all know this, right? You look around at physical games now, used, sure, but even new ones, they get marked down quite a bit at big box retailers who just have to move stock. Yeah, you could find games cheap if you wait long enough, right? Sometimes it's a month later even. Anyway, they go on to say, in addition, Sony holds a monopoly on digital sales, unlike platforms like the Microsoft Store, Epic Game Store. PlayStation owners can purchase games and in-game items exclusively in Sony's PlayStation Store. This, along with Sony's dominant position in the console market, leads to what the foundation calls a Sony tax, artificially high prices that make gamers pay more for digital games and in-game content than they would in a competitive market. And this is something we've talked about multiple times now, where you can't go into a store and buy one of those cards that's just the digital game. So before, you were able to do that, but in 2019, Sony just put an end to that completely. So you can only go into a store now and buy digital currency for the PlayStation Store, which then you'll buy the game. And the issue there, of course, is that it all funnels back to Sony in terms of digital sales. So they would indeed control the market. Sure, third parties can put games on sale, whether it's like some big $20 under thing that's being run or a holiday sale. But for the most part, Sony would be controlling a lot of the pricing, obviously for first party, but also different partner releases and publishing deals that they do. So without any competition there, where maybe a retailer says, you know what, these digital cards have been sitting around for a while, we're going to go ahead and just mark them down. Or even just trading games in at, say, a GameStop and be able to get the digital card off of the store shelf. That's also technically competition against just giving Sony money at the digital storefront level. And I mentioned this isn't the first time. Sony has actually been sued several times now in the past few years over this exact same thing. Like, as an example, this was in 2023. Over on Reuters, Sony facing a $7.9 billion mass lawsuit over the PlayStation Store prices. Back in 2021, GamesIndustry.biz, Sony facing lawsuit over PlayStation Store exclusivity, and that was around the situation where they stopped having third-party stores sell digital downloads. You even got to a point where when you bought one at a store, it would print out on your receipt. Do you remember that? I think GameStop, and I remember Best Buy was doing that for a while, and you would just punch the code in. So it didn't even have to be a card on the shelf. They had it all set up there and would just give you a code on the spot for you to go punch in to your PlayStation. Here's the issue we run into, though, and this is a big one. It hasn't been very difficult for Sony to get out of any of these. See, class action lawsuits end up actually being very unfortunate for the consumer, because you picture the idea is it's going to get things changed or justice for a large number of consumers that have been wronged by the big corporation, where in most cases, the firm that is going against, say, Sony, of course, puts this case forward. They know that maybe it's strong enough for them to at least get a settlement, and then they get a large chunk of money there. And then when they split up the rest to the consumers, it's literally like cents. I mean, it's pretty bad. Like here, for example, here's a settlement that Sony did very recently. $7.85 million. That was a class action settlement for a similar case here around the PlayStation Store. So you divide that up by, even though it says here, they're going to be paying it out to eligible PlayStation customers in electronic credits. I mean, this was for like millions and millions of people that were cited. So you can do the math there for yourself. It's not much, maybe $1.20 or something like that. So that's the situation here, and why a lot of these class action lawsuits don't seem to really help out the consumer much, because Sony settles and then just moves on. The thing that they may want to be a little concerned about here is it's so obvious that this is a problem that class action lawsuits are popping up, because it seems like it's just easy money for a lot of these law firms or whoever to make off of Sony. But because it's so obvious, eventually, the way that the market's trending, they'll become so dominant, they might be looked into a bit more in terms of like regulation from higher up, and maybe do what's been happening to Apple or even Google, where they have to like knock down some of the walled garden, and all of a sudden other people, yes, can not only sell digital downloads on the PlayStation Store, but maybe even like just be able to sell games on the PlayStation console itself. That's where it gets a little dicey for Sony, and something they may want to pay attention to here at least somewhat. Is it worth potentially risking that to keep your digital downloads being sold in a Walmart or a Best Buy? I guess that's something they'll test in the future as we go along, but wouldn't shock me if we just see more and more of these lawsuits pop up over the next several years, especially as their market share continues to grow and grow and grow over Xbox. Next up, let's talk about Clair Obscur Expedition 33. It is out next month, and I'm very excited for this title. It is coming to Game Pass, and I might look into it as well, unlike PlayStation 5 for the Pro, or we'll see. But for now, at least, that's I think where I'm going to be playing it on the Xbox. And previews went up yesterday. Now, we've already seen an extended look at it as they went over it in that developer direct, and it looked great pretty much the whole way through, but now we have some additional details and even a certain game that continued to grab comparisons throughout several of these previews. Now, we can also see this extended gameplay clip that they released yesterday. And so the game itself, the big thing that was noted, visuals, the style, the atmosphere that's created in this game, I mean, it was praised across the board, minus one thing, which we'll get to actually a little later on with some of the drawbacks of the previews. The overall map, you do use that to travel to different locations. You can also find items, but it was sort of described as kind of a linear setup, not linear like a Final Fantasy 13 where it's a straight line. Final Fantasy X comes up a lot in these different previews, so I guess sort of like that, where it kind of feels like it's not linear, but it is, at least through the story the whole way. But you'll control your party when moving around that overworld until you find certain points of interest. Now, the combat does show turn order for characters and enemies, again, very similar to Final Fantasy X, so you can plan out your moves and strategize and stuff. They did have action-based combat, of course, shown during the previews, where things will pop up on the screen, different button presses, and you have to time them out correctly. Or, I thought this was really cool, aiming. Like, so if you're a ranged character and you have a gun, you actually have to aim it and stuff. So, like, that just seems like the combat itself is varied enough to be interesting from like moment to moment battles. You do have parrying, jumping, dodging. Those are all active button presses that are all timing based. And what's cool is the parry itself seems to be rewarded quite heavily. So I assume it'll be a little harder to pull off because you can follow up with a counterattack. So like a free attack off of your turn. They just show some different classes like your basics, warrior, mage, and then a few others that were unnamed. The weapons have their own leveling system. So we already know the characters themselves, of course, will be leveling, and you have different abilities, passive or active, but also weapons. So I'm curious if we have ultimate weapons in this game that, of course, we strive towards the end of the game to really get and become super powerful. Now, some of the negatives, the big one, overly done motion blur, and it couldn't be turned off in this preview build. Now, I'd like to think it's a preview build. We'll see about the main release and if there's just more options to pick from, but for now, it looked kind of rough with that, is what was said when you're swinging the camera around in motion. And there was no map, which that's an odd one. Also, again, makes me wonder if just because the preview build itself was pretty focused, they figured you didn't need a map. I don't know about that, though. If you have the full release and there's no map, but they're asking you to explore a bit, running into dead ends, forgetting exactly where you are, I feel like you want to have a map in there. That would be kind of strange to need that in a patch down the road. Nonetheless, though, it is coming out April 24th, 2025. Again, also dropping into Game Pass, and I'll be there day one. I just like the different take on the turn-based RPG, and it's not even that different. It just reminds me of things like Lost Odyssey as an example, or in some cases Final Fantasy X. It just feels like we've gotten so far away from that with a lot of these big releases. Final Fantasy is just completely action-based at this point, right? And we've even heard some murmurings that Dragon Quest could also be heading in that direction. So I'm hoping, just for the sake of the turn-based RPG in general, this ends up being a good release, like good game across the board, and it ends up doing really, really well in terms of sales, interest, even on Game Pass with engagement, the whole thing, because this is the kind of creativity I'd like to see built on top of for turn-based RPGs, but we'll find out next month when it releases. Next up, let's talk about Rockstar making an interesting move, specifically a new acquisition. Well, new, yes, but maybe also somewhat familiar. We can see this post up over on Gamatsu, where they say Video Games Deluxe, which was founded by LA Noire developer Team Bondi founder Brendan McNamara, has previously worked with Rockstar Games on the 2017 releases of LA Noire, the VR case files, as well as the upgrades to Grand Theft Auto the Trilogy, the Definitive Edition. Remember, that was on iOS, Android, through Netflix, and modern consoles. That upgrade or that update was massive. I mean, you could call it an upgrade because it helped out a ton across the board, and I think really worked to repair what was a pretty busted release. I mean, it's still not perfect, but it's significantly better at this point. Now, this was a follow-up here from Rockstar Games' head of publishing. After working together closely over many years, we are excited to have Video Games Deluxe join the team as Rockstar Australia. So they have now been renamed from Video Games Deluxe, Rockstar Australia. That seems like a pretty big deal to take on the moniker there of Rockstar in general. So I look at this and then at their history, and it's like, okay, yes, they worked on, like I said, the 2017 releases of L.A. Noire and L.A. Noire, the VR case files and upgrades for the trilogy. I almost wonder if they are being brought in for, maybe as an example, they could do something with Red Dead Redemption 2 and how that could use like a next generation version and stuff. But also, GTA 6, it's supposed to be coming up this year. We'll see. I don't know if they're necessarily being brought in to help with support there or even just post-launch support down the road. But it is at least something to keep an eye on here to see what Rockstar Australia's next project could be, whether it's going back in time and maybe doing work or remastering or remaking certain titles, or even looking to the future for maybe even Grand Theft Auto Online. Like, that is going to be massive, the successor to the current GTA Online with GTA 6, and it does feel like a situation of almost all hands on deck right now, and that might have been enough to bring them in for, like, into the family of Rockstar, especially after what they did with the trilogy, which was, again, a massive, almost just a full save from what happened when it came out. So yeah, there we go. Rockstar Australia now formed. We'll see what's up next for them. And in our last bit of news, I saw many of you out there say, you know what? The backlog, it's not big enough. I've played through so many titles. I need more games, and I need them cheap. Well, the Switch currently has a sale going on that's not really being highlighted much. Like, there's no big banner on Nintendo's site, this massive sale going on. But there are some titles in here that I'm a little surprised are actually marked down as much as they are without much advertisement on it. So we'll go down the list now, and of course, I'll leave a link down below to Nintendo's sales and deals page that has them all organized there. But I'll start from the top. Now, that's with 13 Sentinels. That's $15. That's a pretty good markdown from, what, the $60? Assassin's Creed, the Ezio Collection. I always say check out the collections because they're marked down. It's just better value overall. That's $16. Batten Kaitos, that's 1 and 2 HD Remaster at $25. Crash Bandicoot 4, which is an awesome 3D platformer, $13. Digimon Story Cyber Sleuth, that's the complete edition at $10. Doom Eternal at $10. Doom and Doom 2, $4. Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, that's $15. Ghostbusters, the video game remaster, that's the awesome game from back on the 360 that I thought was great. $7.50. Lego Horizon Adventure, Sony coming through with a discount, just down to $40 though on this one. Quake and Quake 2 Enhanced Bundle at $6. Sonic Colors Ultimate, $16. Spyro Reignited Trilogy, another nice collection to hone in on here at $14. Tales of Vesperia Definitive Edition at $10. Super Monkey Ball Banana Mania at $12. Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 and 2 might be kind of relevant today if 3 and 4 does get announced, as we're all basically expecting at this point, $16. Unicorn Overlords, half off to $30. And then Yooka-Laylee coming in at $4. So definitely check out some of the sales. Last I saw, there was like 300 or so games currently marked down. So of course, leave any suggestions down below for games people should be looking into. And before we go to the comment of the day, we'll take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, back during the height of the music video game craze, were you a bigger Rock Band or Guitar Hero fan? Guitar Hero, though, 75% to 25%. So I feel like Guitar Hero was the better game if you were just playing by yourself, maybe with 2 players. Rock Band, though, was like untouchable. Like, I mean, it was incredible when you had 4 people playing. Like, you could actually bring together a band. I mean, that was incredible stuff. That was like experience I don't think I've ever had since then, right? Especially, so at that time with Rock Band, I remember I was in college, and you can kind of see the idea that you like the dorm room, everybody together doing Rock Band, drums, somebody pretending to do vocals as best they can, bass, the guitar. It was really, really cool to experience. And I think that, to me, out of the 2, Guitar Hero is probably the most memorable for like the single player experience. I just look at Rock Band as that awesome multiplayer game that you could occasionally get everyone together for, and I think then that was like the top tier experience. But back then, it was a big deal for the music craze, and it's hard to describe to people who may be a bit younger now and and don't remember those days. I mean, it was insanity when Guitar Hero first came out, but then definitely Guitar Hero 2, and then 3, and then Rock Band. It was something else. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day as you're seeing here. This is from Accursed Hulk. Says, we really got John Cena turning heel before GTA 6. Yeah, people were wondering about the GTA. He apparently posted GTA 6 on his Instagram, like the cover. They were wondering if he was hinting towards a release date announcement or he's in GTA 6 or something. I think it was just that meme of, hey, I turned heel before GTA 6 came out. That's like the big thing now, right? This happened before GTA 6. And that was a big deal, clearly, because it's all over social media. People I don't usually see talk about wrestling are now talking about wrestling, which I guess for WWE is a good thing because they're going into WrestleMania. They want as many people talking about the event or the company as possible. And I understand why it's a big deal. It's been 2 decades, 20 years since last time he was a bad guy. The last time he was a bad guy, I remember playing Here Comes the Pain, and his character, you could do his, what was it called, A then, but it's like standing fireman's carry move. And if you were up against the edge of a cell or a high up area, it would immediately go from the finishing move into that. But it wasn't like a scripted move or anything. You just had to be in the right place, the right time, measure it all out. And I would just try to do that over and over again. Me and a couple of friends, we'd play that game constantly. That's like the memory I have of him when he was a bad guy way back then. And now here we are 20 years later, full circle to him becoming a bad guy again. And then I guess going to WrestleMania to headline. So maybe in 2K25, I'll get that whole thing again and I can try to relive the glory days when everything looked really optimistic back in 2004 with the PS2. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. If you missed yesterday's Newswave, I'll leave it up here in a card. Or maybe you too wanted to relive the glory days of the PS2, but be able to take advantage of newer technology that can open the system up completely. I did a video on that over the weekend, and you can check it out right below it. Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.